Hey guys, you want to cast a conniption on your competitors cost efficiently? Maybe annihilate your adversaries with an all-out arcane artillery on an ant's allowance? Yeah. No dough? Maybe you still want to blow them up? Well, you came to the right place. Spellslinging on a budget is easy, powerful, and most importantly, can be done for cents per card. In a game called Magic the Gathering, outside of Gathering, the name promises one other thing. It promises magic. So if you're in need of knowing the ins and outs of spellslinging on a budget, I guess we can get right into it. The EDH fan wiki defines spellslinging as an umbrella term for decks that focus primarily on instants and sorceries. They often contain a mix, I'm not doing this voice the whole time, of low-cost spells and may be cast in quick succession, as well as high-cost, powerful spells that many other archetypes may find difficult to cast. Spellslinger decks often contain similarities to Storm, Control, and combo strategies, though they are not prerequisites for the Spellslinger archetype. Spellslinger decks almost always contain blue and or red. This does an okay job at defining what a Spellslinger is, but a few things to add. Spellslinger isn't a particular way of winning, but more of a way of deck building and playing. Spellslinger decks are always based around instants and sorceries. How do we win with those instants and sorceries on a budget? Well, that's where this video comes in. In this definition, they bring up the sub-strategies of Spellslinger, like Storm, Control, Combo, which gets into the ways we plan on winning. So let's get into the sub-strategies of Spellslinger and give y'all a rundown on them. Afterwards, we'll get more in depth on each of these.
They did what?
Storm decks are based around chaining as many small spells together as possible. These decks are fast. They are speed. They're not your granddaddy's type of deck. Now, these small spells we play can include cantrips, burn spells, or just small value removal pieces. They chain these spells together to trigger value through damage engines, or by just playing straight up Storm cards, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Storm decks are fast, aggressive, and a goddamn glass cannon.
Hey, Nux.
Big spell decks are all about the late game. They love playing huge chaotic spells to sway the game in our favor, or to just straight up win them. We pair these big game warping spells with effects that can copy our spells we cast, along with removal and board wipes to make sure we don't lose the early and mid game. And then if we can cast 2, 3, sometimes 4 copies of these big spells, we hit them with the bomb, biddy, bomb, and we're sitting pretty good. Big spell decks are obviously slow. They're methodic, they're purposeful, they're very tempo based, and they set up for the mid to late game to make a huge fucking play and, to take the game home.
He's cool. I like it.
Control combo decks are very straightforward and surprisingly doable on a budget. Our game plan is to obviously control the game and our opponent's actions. We do this by playing counter spells along with removal and board wipes to deal with anything that does manage to hit play. After using all of our instants and sorceries to slow down the early game, we play uncounterable huge game enders, combos, or just straight up win the game cards. Easy clap. These are super methodic as well, control-y. You kind of have your hand in everything going on in the game. Token spellslingers may seem weird, but surprisingly, when you're doing this much spellslinging, your creature count isn't that high, so if you can make up for that by running, token spells, that's pretty good. And those token spells are going to be instants and sorceries, so you can still run the spellslinger payoffs in your deck while you're flooding the board. You still have control elements. These kind of decks are just kind of good everywhere. They're good in hand, they're good at controlling, they're good at making a board state, they're good at having a win condition. Very strong version of Spellslinger.
People are retarded.
And finally, toolbox decks are based around having the answer for any situation. Now you might ask, how is that different than control? Toolbox takes that what if literally. Like, what if they play a reanimator deck? Crypt Incursion. What if they play against a token deck? Or a group hug deck? Aether Snap. What if we go against a control deck? Well, we just so happen to have 5 different negates in the deck. What if we don't end up needing those cards? Well, we've got plenty of looting effects to ditch the cards we don't need to search for the tools we need. All the while winning with whatever Spellslinger payoffs you see fit, on top of dealing with most problems that are brought your way. Toolbox decks are super versatile, fun to pilot, and a great way to improve game knowledge, because you'll have to deal with a lot of different situations. Outside of these 5 specific lines of playing Spellslinger, some of your strategies may come down to your commander, that might get more specific, so always keep that in mind. Past that, let's look at each of these strategies again, and all the commanders and cards at our disposal on a budget. Before we get into this next part, keep in mind, links are down below for all these subsections. There's a huge Mox field list that has all the cards I talk about in this video and more, so if you want to check out that link while you're watching this, go ahead. Now, knowing the basics of building a Spellslinger deck, let's go through the subsections and look at our budget options. Keep in mind, every card we're going to be going over is under $1, so you can do all these strategies on a pretty tight budget. Let's start with Storm. A Storm deck, first and foremost, is about spell count. The amount of spells we cast, preferably on a single turn, is super important in these kind of decks. So Storm requires small instants and sorcery spells that we can chain together to bring us further value. Cards like Opt, Serum Visions, Preordain, and Consider are all one-drop spells that fix our draws, as well as drawing a card and replacing themselves, allowing us to potentially draw into more spells, while straight-up cantrips like Birthday Escape, Cling to Dust, Cremate, Peek, and many more over on the Moxfield list in the description provide us a 1-drop instant or sorcery that replaces itself and has a little piece of utility on it that we may or may not need. There are tons of cantrips in Magic, and they're all sense. Now, with all these instants and sorceries being cast, we need some draw and card fixing engines to make sure we secure more instants and sorceries that we can cast. Cards like Academy Wall, Lunar Mystic, Gale, Waterdeep Prodigy, and Trail of Evidence all supply us with card draw and card fixing for just playing instants and sorceries. Now, while we're casting all these spells and drawing all these cards, we need some damage engines, so we can actually win the game. So stuff like Keswick Flame Breather, Pink Horror, Gutter Snipe, and Firebrand Archer are all some awesome options for under $1 to ping our opponents whenever we cast these spells. There's a ton more over on the Moxfield page. These cards will make bringing home the game a lot easier by whittling the opponents down for us just casting our spells, just doing what we do. On top of that, you might just choose to run a burn package because burn spells are cheap and they also trigger all these other ping things. Cards like Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Ranger's Firebrand, Rift Bolt, as well as, again, many more over on the Moxfield. All come in under $1. All will help us bring our opponent's life down to 0. Seems good. So why do we care about spell count and spamming all these spells? Storm, baby. Storm is a keyword ability that will copy the spell with Storm when it's cast for each spell that you cast before it. So you can see how chaining all these spells together gets pretty good. Grape Shot, Scatter Shot, Ignite Memories, and Tendrils of Agony are all Storm spells that deal damage or drain opponents. Pair this with enough spells, enough pings, enough burn, you can start taking people out pretty quick. Plus, damage isn't the only thing you can do with Storm. Elemental Eruption, Empty the Warrens, and Hunting Pact can storm us out tokens, so that's something to think about. There's also some more wild Storm cards, like stealing creatures or playing spells off the top of your library for free with cards like Spread Insurrection or Mind's Desire, so if you want to get crazy with it. And finally, for Storm, running some instants and sorcery recursion is needed, so you can get back some of those cantrips, but more importantly, get back your Storm cards, because again, using these things twice, it gets even more ridiculous. Cards like Archaeomancer, Flood of Recollection, Izzet Chronarch, and Mystic Retrieval, as well as more over on Moxfield, bring us back instants and sorceries to use again, which is really good. So let's move on to the big spell decks. Big spell decks are all about one thing, and one thing only. Big. You're trying to play the biggest, craziest instants and sorceries, and just create insane plays. Obviously, we need big fun spells in a deck like this, and for under $1, there's a surprisingly large amount of just game-ending awesome spells that we can copy, start playing. Super good. You want 13 zombies? Boom, Army of the Damned. Do we want to play, do we want to get a copy of every creature our opponent has? Yeah, Clone Legion seems pretty good. Want a ton of free cards and treasures? Hit the Mother Lode. You want to switch around life totals like God himself? Sands of Time. You want to see me beat the living shit out of an opponent with giant spells? Want to see me do it again? And that's not even near all of them. There's a ton of big bombs that you can take your pick of. Now, what would make these big spells biggier? Copy spells are anything that's going to copy the next instant or sorcery we cast. We've got permanents that can do this in the form of cards like Arcane Bombardment, Double Vision, Dual Casting, Swarm Intelligence, all very good. We also have tons of instants and sorceries that can copy our instants and sorceries. Say that 4 times fast. It's got a lot of S's. It sounds like shit on my mic. This is going to be great to edit. Display of Power, Dual Casting, Dual Strike, and Twinferno. Great examples of spells like these, along with many others over on Moxfield. Again, go check that link out. Run your counter spells, your removal to make it to the late game, and go big. That's all we need. Control combo decks. You're a real special type of little shit, aren't ya? Control combo decks are pretty obviously about being in charge of what happens in the game and when. We do this through counter spells like Confound, Counterspell, Drown in the Lock, Negate, to keep problem cards from resolving. If anything does end up resolving that we don't want in play, we run plenty of removal like Abrupt Decay, Crib Swap, Heartless Act, Reality Shift to deal with any issues on board. Now, if those problems begin stacking up a little too quickly, yeah, we run slightly more board wipes than a normal deck does just to deal with that as well. Akroma's Vengeance, Chain Reaction, Merciless Eviction, Terminus. We'll keep problems from getting on the board before we're ready. You might say ready for what? Well, one of the two things. We're either going to play late game, almost impossible to deal with creatures like Pearl Lake Ancient, Aetherling, Niv Mizzet Perun, Sphinx of the Final Word, to outvalue and smack opponent's face while we continue to control them, or we just straight up combo out. And to show you that you can combo on a budget, I have 3 infinite combos here that all include cards for under $1. First, Curiosity and Niv Mizzet. Curiosity makes the enchanted creature draw a card when it does damage. Niv deals 1 damage, and whenever you deal damage, you draw a card. Infinite damage, infinite card draw. Have fun. We've also got Brass's Bounty plus Mechanized Production. Control 10 or more treasures on your upkeep. you win the game. So you just have to control the board until it gets back to your turn, which in a control combo deck seems pretty easy. And finally, we got one that I never knew of, which I really like. We've got Malcolm, Keen-Eye, Navigator, Reckless Fireweaver, and Trickery Charm. Trickery Charm's going to turn our Reckless Fireweaver into a pirate, and whenever we make a treasure from Malcolm, we deal 1 damage from the Fireweaver, which is now a pirate, which triggers Malcolm to create a treasure. Boom, infinite damage, infinite treasures, sorry about ya. Spellslinger token decks look very similar to Storm decks, just replace some of the cantrips and all the Storm spells with token spells like Dragon Fodder, Empty the Warrens, Gather the Townsfolk, Krenko's Command, to flood the board with tokens while still playing instants and sorceries. Replace the ping engines in Storm with token engines like Alondra Skydreamer, Third Path Iconoclast, Murmuring Mystic, Talran Sky Summoner, the classics, all under $1. Turns all of our spell slinging into tokens on the board. Throw in some one-way board wipes in a token deck like Hour of Reckoning, Dusk and Dawn, and boom, you've got a strategy. Finish off the opponents by smacking their face with your huge field or your big spells. You may notice you can take bits and pieces from all of these different Spellslinger strategies and, kind of pair them together and it works. Finally, we've got Toolbox Spellslinger decks. These decks are similar to Control, but where Control prepares for anything that would be a serious problem to the specific Control deck itself, Toolbox brings an answer to anything that could be a problem for the table itself. If there's a problem we have, that deck has the answer for it. Graveyard deck popping off, we got Crypt Incursion, a token deck doing a little too well. Outside of the board wipes, we got Aether Snap. The CEDH deck at the table keeps rolling everyone. We run Sadistic Sacrament just to stop decks like that, sorry. But, hey Nick, that deck sounds kind of cool, but what if we don't need those cards? What if we're not against those strategies at all? We run looting cards, motherfucker. Cards like Faithless Looting, Thrill of Possibilities, Careful Study. They let us ditch the cards that we don't need to dig for the tools we do need, which is really cool. These decks run plenty of tutors like Demonic Collusion, Diabolic Tutor, Increasing Ambition to get the right tools for the right situation, as well as plenty of card draw and card fixing like Opt, Preordain, Serum Visions to dig for those same answers. Toolbox decks are less about winning the game, but more about problem solving. You know, if you want to win, you can go the combo route and add that to your toolbox list. Go your Niv Mizzets and your Curiosities in this. Or you can go the big unstoppable creature route like Pearl Lake Ancients to secure the win. Toolbox decks are there to solve problems. You can kind of decide how you're wanting to win with a toolbox deck. You don't even have to want to win. You could just be there to problem solve. These are probably one of my favorite decks to run. Just like there's tons of powerful cards for Spellslinger strategies that are under $1, there is a ton of powerful commanders for Spellslinger that are under $1. So let's play a game I like to call, How Do You Choose to Fuck Up Your Opponent? It's pretty easy. Honestly, it's an easy game. I read you a commander, and you plug in any of those Spellslinger strategies that I talked about to it. And just imagine how gross it could be. All right, let's get into it. Magnus the Red. 3 a blue and a red for a 4/5. Flying. Instants and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature token you control. Whenever Magnus the Red deals combat damage to a player, create a 3/3 red spawn creature token. This one's kind of easy. Plug in that token strategy we were talking about. Talran Sky Summoner. Welcome to the party. Krenko's Command? Welcome to the party. But wait. This is not just a token Spellslinger deck. We can also plug in the big spells sub-strategy into this because our instants and sorceries are going to cost 1 less for each creature we control. Yeah. Mnemonic Deluge? Yeah, I'll cast that for like 3 mana. That's fine. Apex of Power for 3 mana? Sure. Very gross. Very good deck. Very budget. Stella Lee from Thunder Junction's really good. 1 a blue and a red for a 2/4. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Tapper, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn. She could go a lot of different ways. She's leaning way more towards plugging in the Storm strategy to this. Run your cantrips like Ops and Preordain so that you can cast your second and third spell each turn to get her triggers. To get her trigger and activation, and then run the Storm payoffs like Tendrils of Agony or Grape Shot. Play one of those as your third spell, copy that with Stella Lee. You're storming out huge with that. Or, again, plug in the token strategy with her. A ton of small spells you can cast, like Krenko's Command and Goblin Fodder, and then you can copy those spells, flood the board with even more tokens. And for the last commander example, there are plenty more commanders that you can go look at over on the Moxfield list. We'll use Kess Dissident Mage because she's the most easy to plug in any of these strategies to. 1 a blue, a black, and a red for a 3/4. Flying. During each of your turns, you may cast an instant or a sorcery spell from your graveyard. If a spell cast this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. You could plug Control into her and lean very heavily into the removal aspects of it, so you get to reuse all these removal pieces, keep every problem off the board that you don't want on the board. Go for the throat, you get to cast it twice. Power Word Kill, you get to cast it twice. Unsummon, you can cast it twice. And, you're casting all of these control elements, all these removal spells. You multiple times a turn. Obviously with Kess, you could plug a Storm sub-theme into this and have it work. But where my heart lies with Kess is definitely a toolbox list. I think she is so cool because you can use all of these toolbox pieces twice. The graveyard decks at the table, sorry, we're using Crypt Incursion twice. To all the token, small creature, weenie decks at the table, we're going to get to use Anger of the Gods twice. So have fun building up any kind of board state. Big spells. You know what's better than casting those big spells once? Casting them twice. See what I'm saying? Kess is the ultimate example of plug and play Spellslinger on a budget. Very fun. And these are not even the beginning. There's a ton of good commanders that are under $1 that meet the Spellslinger requirements. And there's a ton that I missed, probably. So if you want to comment some of your favorite budget Spellslinger commanders, maybe some strategies I missed, stuff like that. And with that, we have summed up most of the spellslinging strategies. And hopefully, at least outside of that, inspired a little bit of deck creation from you guys. Hopefully you guys are wanting to make a Spellslinger deck. Maybe you were on a budget and you were on the fence about building a deck like this, and now you're like, hey, there's a ton of stuff for under $1 that I can run that Spellslinger. Head over to that Moxfield link that's down in the description. It's also in the comments, and just start taking bits and pieces from all those subsections and make your own Spellslinger list, you know? Comment the list if you end up making it. Comment any sub-strategies of Spellslingers that I ended up missing. Let me know down below. Be sure to check out the description for Moxfield list. Be sure to check out the description for our socials. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Make sure to subscribe, like. We're trying to get to 10K by the end of the year. It seems like a big challenge, but with a community like this, nothing's a challenge, babe. Anyway, hope that didn't lose any subscribers. Much love, and go play some Magic.
Perfect.
In response, run 100 up. You think I'm mulligan a pub, you ain't one of us. Where's it at? Where's it at? Ain't noticing it, I'm right here. Boom big, I'm noticing it. My pedal to the metal like build it. My pedal float shit like I killed it. Real shit, let this little nerd get a word in real quick.